When it comes to security, help desk folks are often enlisted to either resolve problems or to enforce certain security settings. And I'm here to talk with Dakota Snow about just those things. Dakota, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
Not bad, not bad. Dakota and I are joining you all in from the Pacific Northwest. I live in Washington State. Dakota, where do you live? And tell us a little bit about what you do.
I'm based out of Oregon. I am currently the director of network operations for a local internet provider. And as a director of network operations, I do actually handle quite a few security issues. So this is a very good topic to talk about.
What are some of the major security things that you support and deal with on a regular basis?
The everything can go down to a good password.
Okay.
In all honesty, because physical security is just as important on a machine as any other security. So that's one thing that I constantly find myself having to make sure passwords are being properly enforced across different computers.
So a lot of times those things are done automatically, right? Where you have the password complexity requirements and things like that. Um, what are some of the ways that those are enforced? Do you set? You don't set those policies, but you certainly manage them.
Correct. So most of them are managed through Active Directory, through a domain controller that sends out those requirements out to the individual workstation. So you create the policies and deploy them out to different workstations, the different security policies, and one of those is password complexity. So that's one thing I constantly find myself having to make sure that's set properly.
When it comes to, and a lot of times those domain controllers are going to be installed, or they could be up on Azure, right? I mean, you can find them in the cloud or not.
Absolutely, and that's the new thing that nowadays, especially with the pandemic, has actually migrated a lot of domain controllers up to a cloud-based system up in Azure because they're a lot easier to manage remote workstations.
When it comes to support, is supporting people with complex passwords, what are some ways that you help people handle that so they're not writing those passwords down on their desktop or
Yeah, no, and that's the most important thing is not necessarily the most complex password is the most secure password. It's a password that is someone can easily remember, but they're not writing it down on a certain place or putting it on a text file on their desktop. So trying to help them, give them suggestions on different style passwords they can use that will meet the organization's password requirement, because every organization has different password requirements.
one thing I've noticed, Dakota, is that when it comes to password expiration, sometimes an expired password, let's say I'm logging into a cloud or some sort of installed whatever resource, and my password has timed out. Sometimes that can appear as another issue. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely. And sometimes people will forget to reset their password when that password expires. And sometimes they'll think they'll be using an old password when they've, currently reset their password. There's several different opportunities where that can actually become a problem. And a lot of times what will happen is they'll use an old password, even though they've recently reset it, and then they'll end up locking their domain account out and lose all access to their workstation.
That's always fun. Okay, so that's
Yes.
when you end up having to resolve that. How many times have you seen screensaver locks, right? Screensaver, password protected screensavers actually used? I mean, what's the percentage there?
Right. Well, and currently in my organization, that's a policy we enforce via group policy. And we get some kickback from that because people get annoyed and, oh, why is my screensaver coming on in 15 minutes? And every time it comes on, I have to type in a password. Well, if your machine hasn't been used for 15 minutes, I tell them there's a good chance you've walked away from that workstation, and there could be sensitive documents or sensitive information a person could access if that workstation is left unlocked.
Have you seen a lot of two-factor authentication implemented over time? I'm sure there's a lot more of it nowadays than there was.
Oh, it is quickly becoming a very popular and very common practice in the workplace, where two-factor authentication is just not even a choice anymore.
Right.
It is just a requirement, and is a very good safety practice just to have implemented.
Couple of things I'd like to talk about when it comes to the security settings. There's, auto run and auto play. Auto run, we'll start with that, meaning that if some sort of condition changes or whatever, then an application will automatically run. autoplay is more along the lines of the multimedia and things like that. If you put in a CD, then some sort of media application. Do you find yourself disabling that sort of thing just for security reasons, things like that?
Absolutely. There's several different examples of someone finding a USB stick in a parking lot, and they're curious. It'll have something wrote on it like this year's budget, or this year's bonuses wrote on it, and they'll be like, "Ooh, what kind of bonus am I going to get?" So they're going to pick up that USB device and plug it into their computer, and it can actually automatically, as soon as you plug that device in, without any interaction, it can automatically upload a malicious file to that workstation. So we find ourselves implementing policies to try to counteract those instances, because that is a security vulnerability. Absolutely.
Big way. It's easy to say, oh, well, that's kind of a cliche. I have actually worked as a pen tester not too long ago, and actually snagged a really talented person with that.
Yes.
I put a USB out there, and she put in the drive and everything, and I got her. That was a lot of fun. So that still happens commonly, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Well, Dakota, thank you so much for talking about some of the ways in which you can configure security for today's help desk. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Anytime.